TIFU by pretending to know Spanish in front of my girlfriend's family. This happened about 6 months ago, but the shame still lives deep in my bones like an emotional parasite. For context, I, 28M, had been dating this amazing girl, Camila, 27F, for about a year and a half when she invited me to meet her family for a big holiday get-together at her grandmother's house in Miami. They're originally from Colombia, and while Camila was born in the States, most of her extended family primarily speaks Spanish. I, on the other hand, am as white as mayo and speak roughly 5 words of Spanish, all learned from fast food menus and Dora the Explorer. Here's the thing, early in our relationship, I may have slightly exaggerated my Spanish abilities. We were at this Latin music festival and I blurted out, "Yeah, I speak a little Spanish," just trying to impress her. She raised an eyebrow, smirked, and asked me to say something. I panicked and said "Me gusta la biblioteca," which made her laugh. I thought that was the end of it, a dumb joke. But from that point on, I occasionally threw out random phrases or nodded when she spoke to her mom on the phone in Spanish, pretending I knew what was going on. So fast forward to December. We land in Miami and her entire extended family is there, like everybody, her parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, some guy named Tío Flaco whose real name I never found out, and of course, her abuela. Camila gives me the look, remember, don't stress. Just be polite and try your best. Dinner that first night was like being thrown into the deep end of a linguistic pool filled with sharks. Spanish flying everywhere. I smiled, nodded, laughed when everyone else laughed, and said "see" about 30 times. I thought I was doing great until Camila leaned over and whispered, "You just agreed that you'd help Tío Flaco move his refrigerator tomorrow." I played it cool and said, "Oh yeah, I love fridges." But the real disaster started 2 days later. Her cousin Isabella was having a small engagement party, and Camila's dad decided to give a toast. It was in Spanish, and everyone was getting emotional. I was feeling bold, maybe it was the 3 rum and cokes I had downed trying to stay loose, or the fact that Camila looked so proud having me there. So I decided to give a toast too. In Spanish. Let me repeat, I decided to give a toast in a language I absolutely do not speak. I stood up, tapped my glass, and cleared my throat. The room went quiet. Camila looked confused, then slightly panicked. I began, trying to channel every Spanish word I had ever heard. "Buenos noches, mi familia nueva," I began. That part landed well. A couple of smiles. Encouraging nods. "I estoy muy emocionado para estar aquí con las personas de mi corazón." This is when it started to wobble. I wanted to say I was happy to be with the people in my heart, but I don't think las personas de mi corazón means that. It might mean the people made of my heart. People started shifting in their seats. I plowed ahead. "Camila es mi luna, mi sol, mi arroz con pollo." That got a chuckle. Okay, maybe I was killing it. Then, the final blow. I wanted to say I love this family so much, and I hope to be part of it. What I actually said, with full confidence, was, "Yo quiero embarazar esta familia." Now, if you don't speak Spanish, you might think that sounded sweet. But what I had just declared, loudly and with a big smile, was, "I want to impregnate this family." The silence was volcanic. Camila choked on her drink. Her abuela gasped and made the sign of the cross. One of the cousins burst out laughing, and someone else muttered "Que carajo?" I stood there, frozen, confused as hell. I thought maybe I had just been too poetic. I gave a nervous smile and raised my glass. "Salud?" Camila grabbed my arm and yanked me back into my seat so fast I think I blacked out. She leaned in and whispered, "What the hell, Jake? Do you know what you just said?" "No." I whispered back, sweating bullets. "You said you want to impregnate my entire family." Cue the mental implosion. The rest of the night was a blur. People were kind enough to move on quickly, though I noticed Tío Flaco watching me with a mixture of suspicion and admiration. We left a bit early, and I spent the car ride back to her parents' house staring out the window, contemplating a new identity and maybe a move to rural Canada. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Camila's mom that just said, "Buenos dias, Dawn Fertile." Camila thought it was hilarious. Thank God she has a sense of humor. Her family, to their credit, decided to let it go and even began calling me El Padrino, the Godfather, as a running joke. I've since started taking actual Spanish lessons. I can now confidently say things like "No quiero embarazar a nadie," "I don't want to impregnate anyone," and "Por favor, corrígeme si digo algo estúpido," "Please correct me if I say something stupid." I'm visiting them again this summer, and Camila's abuela already told me she expects another toast, pero en inglés esta vez, por favor. Moral of the story: never fake fluency, especially not in front of 30 emotionally charged Colombians. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by accidentally joining a cult thinking it was a startup accelerator. I'm still mentally unpacking the events of the last 6 weeks, and it honestly feels like I woke up from a fever dream. Let me preface this by saying I'm a 28-year-old software engineer and startup enthusiast. I've been to hackathons, slept under desks, lived on Soylent, and believed in the gospel of move fast and break things. So when I saw an ad for an immersive tech founders retreat promising VC access, daily ideation sprints, and total life integration, I was all in. It was called Nova Seed. Sounded edgy. Futuristic. Like something Peter Thiel would invest in. The retreat was in upstate New York, in this forested compound with sleek shipping container housing and a minimalist aesthetic that screamed money. No cell service, but they had satellite Wi-Fi, limited to Slack and Notion, of course, to reduce digital noise. I wasn't even suspicious. I was impressed. Day 1, we're told to surrender our devices for mental recalibration. Again, totally sold. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm addicted to Twitter. This is good for me. We get matching black hoodies with the Nova Seed logo, an abstract triangle inside a circle. Looked very Y Combinator meets mysterious space cult. Should have been my first red flag. The schedule is packed. We wake up at 5:30 a.m. sharp to the sound of Tibetan singing bowls piped through the intercom, then do vision journaling in the forest, followed by protein smoothies, which tasted like sadness and mushrooms, and then 8 hours of founder alignment in this glass dome building called the core. No laptops, just whiteboards and constant eye contact. By the third day, we're all saying weird things like the path to product market fit begins within, and failing fast is spiritual. We were sleep-deprived, emotionally raw, and microdosed with something they claimed was legal in Costa Rica. Probably psilocybin. We were bonding like trauma survivors. One of the other attendees, a UX designer named Derek, started crying in the middle of a group mindshare because he realized his app idea to optimize laundry cycles was shallow and out of alignment with the flow of the universe. Another woman renounced her series of funding mid-retreat, saying capitalism was an illusionary algorithm. I thought they were being dramatic. Then I started to get the dreams. Like vivid, recurring dreams. Always the same. I'm standing at the edge of a massive void, and a glowing triangle floats before me, whispering, "You are the product. You are the code." One night, I woke up in the woods outside the compound, barefoot and shivering, holding a handmade notebook that just said "Be less human" in Sharpie. I don't remember writing it. At this point, I should have left. But I didn't. Because every time I expressed doubts, they'd say things like resistance is the final stage of ego death or that's just your old architecture reacting. They were so calm. So damn calm. And I was sleep-deprived, malnourished, and terrified of being the only one not getting it. Week 3, things got weirder. We were introduced to the merge, a group ritual where we were blindfolded, placed in a circle, and made to chant phrases like I dissolve, I become, I seed the nova. Then came the code baptisms, where we each had to upload a symbolic piece of code into the source core, an air-gapped Raspberry Pi inside a shrine, while confessing our biggest professional failures. Mine was a dead crypto wallet app that lost $30,000 in user funds. I cried. They hugged me. One person whispered, "Now you're clean." I actually felt relief. That scared me. Around week 4, outside communication was subtly discouraged. You had to fill out a communication alignment form to use email, and most requests were denied. One guy snuck in a satellite phone and called his girlfriend. He got recalibrated, which meant he disappeared for 2 days and came back extremely chill and monotone, like an Apple genius bar worker who's seen God. I was too far in. I stopped questioning things. I shaved my head during a symbolic shedding workshop. I burned my college diploma in a bonfire called Release Night. I deleted my old startup's GitHub repo with a speech about embracing the void. I wasn't even high. I was just broken. Then came the day we were told about the seeding. This was the final phase of our transformation. We were each assigned a city and instructed to return to the world to plant the new code. We were given debit cards, preloaded with $500 and an Ethereum wallet, business cards with the Novaseed logo and the phrase "Let us begin," and custom pitch decks filled with vague techno-philosophical buzzwords. Mine was for something called EcoNet, the decentralized identity consciousness layer. I was sent to Austin. I didn't question it. I got an Airbnb. I wore my hoodie. I went to tech meetups and started talking about algorithmic transcendence. People actually listened. Tech bros loved it. Someone offered me seed funding after a 15-minute demo made entirely in Figma. I started believing again. Then it fell apart. I ran into an ex-coworker at a WeWork. He saw my shaved head, my 1,000-yard stare, the pitch deck filled with phrases like spiritual redundancy and quantum empathy scalability, and said, "Dude, are you in a cult?" I laughed it off. But that night, I Googled Novaseed. Nothing. I tried to find old retreat mates on LinkedIn. No results. The email I had for them bounced. The debit card stopped working. The Ethereum wallet was drained. The website I originally found them through? Gone. I started spiraling. I stopped sleeping. I started wearing normal clothes again, got a haircut, tried to code. Nothing felt real. I went to a therapist and unloaded everything. He said, "You've been indoctrinated." That word hit like a truck. It's been 3 weeks since then. I'm trying to put my life back together. I got a contract job doing back-end for a fintech app and moved out of Austin. I have recurring nightmares of glowing triangles and the phrase "seed the new dawn." Sometimes I wake up whispering it. If you ever see a program called Novaseed, run. Or don't. Maybe you'll find something I didn't. Maybe the void has answers. Maybe I am the product. TIFU by catfishing my dad on Tinder. So, this all started because I was bored. That's how a lot of dumb stories start, right? I was bored, I had a few drinks, and my best friend Chloe and I were hanging out in my apartment on a Friday night watching true crime documentaries and swiping through Tinder just for laughs. I'm a 24-year-old woman. Single, kind of awkward, work-from-home job, and I don't get out much. Chloe's my ride or die, and we've been through a lot of weird stuff together, but this might top the list. We'd been swiping through profiles for about 45 minutes, making fun of weird bios and trying to guess people's icks, when I got this terrible, chaotic idea: what if we made a fake Tinder profile and just saw how many dudes would fall for an obviously fake, overly sexy persona? You know. For science. We set up a fake profile using some stock images of a model. Nothing illegal, just a pretty girl named Sabrina, age 27, yoga teacher, world traveler, into deep convos and vibing. Chloe and I had a little too much fun writing the bio. We made her just spiritual enough to be convincing, but with enough buzzwords to feel like every guy's dream match. Within 10 minutes of going live, Sabrina had like 30 matches. Half of them were guys sending "Hey gorgeous" messages. One guy just sent a gif of a lion roaring. It was all fun and games, until we saw him. My dad. My actual, 52-year-old, very married, very family values dad. Chloe saw it first and just stared at my screen like she was watching a car crash. I was laughing until she said, "Wait, isn't that your dad?" And sure enough, there he was, smiling in a flannel shirt, holding a fishing pole. His bio read, "Just seeing what's out there. Life's short. Let's laugh together." I stared at it, completely frozen. I thought maybe it was a fake profile. Maybe someone stole his pictures? But the location matched, and he had a Spotify anthem. It was him. I've always thought my parents were solid. Like, I grew up thinking they were the couple that made it. Married for 27 years, corny little anniversary Facebook posts, family camping trips, you know the type. My mom still calls him babe unironically. So this made my stomach drop through the floor. Chloe immediately said we should swipe right, just to see if he'd match. I hesitated. This felt like it crossed into psychological warfare, but curiosity, and maybe rage, got the best of me. I swiped right. Instant match, no delay. That meant he had already swiped right on Sabrina. Chloe was losing it. I was spiraling. He messaged immediately. He said, "Hey there, you have the kind of smile that could make a man forget everything else." What the actual hell? I was shaking. I had no idea what to do. Part of me wanted to drive to their house and confront him. Another part of me wanted to keep going, see how far he'd go, maybe catch him saying something unforgivable. Guess which part won? So I kept messaging as Sabrina. I told myself it was to gather evidence. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I needed to know. Over the next few days, I talked to my dad. As Sabrina. He told Sabrina he was in a complicated place. That his wife, aka my mom, didn't understand him anymore. That he'd always been a romantic at heart. He called Sabrina his little secret escape. He even asked if we could meet. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining my mom doing laundry or making dinner while her husband sent flirty messages to a fake 27-year-old. I was seething. But then, it got weirder. One night, during another conversation with Sabrina, he said something strange. "It's funny, you remind me of my daughter. She's clever too. Always had a sharp tongue." My blood ran cold. I asked, "Oh? What's she like?" And he replied, "She's amazing. But she's grown up so fast. I don't know how to talk to her anymore. I feel like a ghost in her world." I just sat there, staring at the screen. That was the first moment I didn't feel pure fury. For a second, I just felt sad. He kept talking about how disconnected he felt, how being Sabrina's secret made him feel seen again. He wasn't just looking for sex, he was lonely. Still a betrayal, sure, but suddenly more complicated than dad's just a cheating scumbag. I told Chloe, who was now deeply invested. We talked it through, and I decided I had to confront him. I couldn't keep this going, and I definitely couldn't look my mom in the eyes without exploding. So the next day, I called him and asked if we could meet for coffee. Just the two of us. We sat down in this quiet little cafe, and I was shaking. He looked tired, older somehow. I tried to ease into it, asked how he was doing, if everything was okay. He smiled like everything was totally normal. That pissed me off even more. I took a deep breath and said, "So, met any interesting people lately?" On Tinder maybe? He went completely still. Didn't blink. Just stared at me. I said, you matched with someone named Sabrina recently. His face went white. Then I dropped the hammer. That was me, Dad. I made that profile. I saw your account. I talked to you. The silence was like gravity. He opened his mouth a few times, trying to say something, but nothing came out. Finally, he just whispered, "Why would you do that?" That sent me over the edge. I did this. I lit into him, about Mom, about betrayal, about how I had to find out this way. I was crying, shaking, yelling. People were staring. I didn't care. He didn't deny anything. Just kept nodding, taking it. Then he said, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." I didn't mean for it to get that far. I needed to feel like someone saw me again. We both cried. He asked me not to tell Mom. I told him he had to. That I would if he didn't. A week later, he sat my mom down and came clean. There was screaming. Crying. I stayed with Chloe for a few nights. My mom kicked him out of the house. They're in counseling now. I don't know what's going to happen. I still feel sick when I think about it. About how it all started from a dumb joke. About how close I came to knowing way too much about my father's inner fantasies. So yeah. TIFU. By catfishing my dad. And now every time someone mentions Tinder, I twitch. This happened last weekend, and my dignity has not recovered. So I, 29 am, recently moved to a new city for a job. I don't know anyone here, and I've been trying to be more social. Last Saturday, I was walking through a park when I passed by this beautiful ivy-covered chapel. Outside, there was a small wooden sign that said, "Celebrating the life of Marcus Ellery, all welcome." There were maybe 15 to 20 people gathered, and soft jazz was playing. I didn't know Marcus Ellery. But I stood there for a moment, and honestly, the music and warm weather were inviting. I figured it was an open memorial or community celebration. I even Googled Marcus Ellery on my phone and found that he had been a local jazz pianist who'd passed recently. He sounded like a cool guy. I love jazz. I thought, why not just step inside, sit quietly, and pay respects to someone who clearly touched people's lives. I was alone anyway. I walked in, nodded politely to a few people, and found a spot near the back. There was an older woman at the front giving a heartfelt speech about Marcus, and a slideshow was playing pictures of him throughout his life. It was emotional, but warm. I sat there quietly, listening and taking it in. Then, at some point, the woman said, "We would love to invite anyone else who knew Marcus to come up and share a few words." I don't know what possessed me. I think part of it was the pressure of the moment, the emotion in the room, the fact that I'd recently read a book on saying yes to new experiences, and maybe a sprinkle of main character syndrome. Whatever it was, I stood up. I don't know what I thought I was going to say. But as I walked to the front, I could feel the eyes on me, and I realized, too late, that no one in the room recognized me. Still, I was committed. I opened with, "Marcus meant a lot to me. He helped me through a tough time, and I'm grateful for the moments we had together." Immediately I felt the energy shift. A few people nodded politely. But I noticed an older man's brows furrow slightly. A middle-aged woman near the front sat up straighter. "I met Marcus at a low point in my life," I said. "And he was the kind, thoughtful, talented. We spent many late nights just talking. Playing music. Drinking wine." There was a long silence after that. The woman near the front blinked rapidly. The man crossed his arms. But I was in too deep now. So I wrapped it up with, "I'll miss him." "We all will." "Thank you." As I sat down, the air was different. Uncomfortable. But no one said anything directly. The woman who had been speaking initially looked a bit stunned, then thanked me and invited someone else up. The service ended shortly after. Then came the real chaos. As I was about to leave, a woman approached me. Blonde, maybe mid-40s, wearing a black dress and heels. She looked intense. "How did you know Marcus?" she asked. I hesitated. "We met at a bar. A few times. Talked a lot about music." She narrowed her eyes. "You said you spent many late nights together." "Yeah, he helped me through a breakup," I stammered, which technically wasn't a lie, because I did recently go through one. "He just listened. Played music. It meant a lot." Her lips tightened. "Marcus was my father." I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. "Oh my God," I said. "I'm so sorry." I didn't realize she didn't blink. "Did you sleep with my father?" "No." I yelped, way too loudly. Heads turned. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You said wine, late nights, deep talks. That sounded like more than friendship." I was just speaking metaphorically. I meant, spiritually late nights." She blinked. "What the hell is a spiritual late night?" I wanted to scream. Look, I didn't know him that well. He once gave me a mixtape. "Marcus hated mixtapes," she said coldly. I was cornered. And panicking. So I did the worst thing possible. I said, "Maybe we were closer than he let on." Her mouth fell open. "Oh my God. You were his lover." "No." Wait, but it was too late. She turned and stormed off to a group of family members, whispering urgently. I saw their heads turn. A few looked horrified. One woman gasped. The older man from earlier, Marcus's brother, I later learned, stared daggers at me. I made the smart choice. I left. Correction, I ran. Ran through the park. Full suit. Sweating bullets. My phone buzzed. Somehow someone had gotten my number from the sign-in sheet. Yes, I signed in at the funeral like an absolute moron. It was a text. "You should be ashamed of yourself." I was. I still am. For the rest of the day, I spiraled. I made the mistake of telling my sister what happened. She laughed so hard she cried. Then told everyone in our family. My mom left a voicemail saying, "Sweetheart, we raised you better than to seduce grieving widowers." I didn't seduce anyone. But now, in the official Ellery family lore, Marcus had a mysterious younger lover who crashed his funeral and left the family with questions. Questions like, did Marcus live a double life? Was he bisexual? Was this man a secret? Why did he lie about mixtapes? I considered writing a letter to explain myself. I even drafted one. But what would I even say? Sorry for falsely implying I was your dead relative's jazz-loving soulmate. I was just vibing with the music and forgot who I was for a moment. So now I avoid that entire park. I've joined a different gym. I switched my grocery store. Every time I hear jazz, I break into a cold sweat. Anyway. That's how I accidentally invented a relationship with a dead man and emotionally destabilized his entire family. TIFU. This happened a couple of years ago, but I still feel a strange mix of guilt, embarrassment, and confusion every time I think about it. Buckle up, because this is the story of how I, a disorganized software developer with questionable attention to detail, ended up accidentally hijacking a stranger's luxury family vacation and somehow lived like royalty for 3 days before getting caught. So a little background, I was working remotely and living in Chicago at the time, burnt out and needing a break. I'd been saving up travel points for a while and saw a decent deal on a resort in Florida. Not just any resort, this place had a private beach, spa, 5 pools, and a golf course I was absolutely never going to use. I figured, screw it, I'll go full bougie for once and booked a 4-night stay under my name, Lucas Warren. I booked the resort, flights, and even rented a convertible because apparently I was having a mid-20s crisis and had watched too much Miami Vice. When I landed, things started going wrong immediately. My bag didn't make the flight. Cool. I spent half an hour filling out a missing luggage claim and was told they'd deliver it when it arrived. Fine, I still had my backpack, phone, wallet, and a change of clothes. I picked up the rental car and headed to the resort. Here's where the disaster truly begins. I pulled up to the main gate of the resort and told the guard my name, Lucas Warren. He scanned his list, nodded, and handed me a little welcome envelope with a room key and a map of the resort. "You're in Villa 4, he said. "Your family's already checked in." My brain short-circuited a bit at "your family's already checked in," but I just nodded like, "Yep, that checks out. I don't even have a family here." I figured maybe he meant housekeeping or something. I drove down the path, found Villa 4, a gorgeous standalone building with a private plunge pool, grill, full kitchen, and a porch overlooking the ocean, and walked right in. There were bags in the living room. Nice bags. Designer brands I'd only seen in airports and dreams. I stood frozen in the doorway, thinking I'd screwed something up. But then I saw a welcome letter on the kitchen counter addressed to Warren family. My last name. I rationalized, maybe they just upgraded me and used my last name generically? I'll admit something now, I should have called the front desk. I should have questioned why I was in a place clearly prepared for a group. But I was so tired and stressed, and everything had been so smooth, besides the luggage, that my lizard brain just whispered, "Shut up and enjoy it." So I did. I spent the first evening sitting in a hot tub that overlooked the ocean, sipping resort wine straight from the bottle, wearing a robe embroidered with the resort logo. I ordered dinner through room service, signed the check to the room, and fell asleep on a king bed with the softest sheets I've ever touched. Day 2? Magical. I was still alone in the villa. No one had shown up. I called the front desk to ask about my luggage. They said it had arrived and been placed in my room. Sure enough, it was sitting by the door. I spent the morning on the private beach, got a massage at the spa, charged to the room, naturally, and tried paddleboarding for the first time. I sucked at it, but who cares? I was living like a damn celebrity. That night, I grilled a steak on the patio grill like a true suburban dad and drank an entire bottle of Cabernet watching the sunset. Day 3 is when things took a turn. Around noon, I got back to the villa after another beach session and noticed a new suitcase in the living room. Not mine. My heart jumped. I walked further in and heard voices coming from one of the bedrooms. Kids' voices. I froze. A few seconds later, a middle-aged man walked into the kitchen holding a pool float. He stopped, looked at me, and just stared. I stared back, still shirtless, holding a margarita, sunburnt and disoriented. "Can I help you?" he asked, with a suspicious calmness. I'm Lucas Warren," I said, as if that explained anything. He blinked. "I'm Greg Warren." There are moments in life where you feel the floor open up beneath you. This was that moment. It turns out, Greg Warren and his actual family, wife, 3 kids, and an elderly mother-in-law, had booked the exact same days at the same resort, staying in the very same Villa 4. Their reservation had been made through a private club, while mine was done online. Somehow, the system double-booked the villa, and when I showed up first and said Lucas Warren, the front desk assumed I was Greg's son. Lucas is apparently also the name of Greg's 17-year-old, who was arriving later that week. So when I said Lucas Warren, they thought I was that Lucas Warren. So to recap, I had crashed a family's luxury vacation by mistake, lived in their villa, used their room credit, spa appointments, welcome wine, and private chef dinner reservation. Yep, I'd eaten that too, and the kicker? The real Lucas Warren hadn't even arrived yet. Greg, to his credit, handled it extremely well. I kept apologizing and trying to explain the mix-up, which made 0 sense out loud. I thought maybe I got an upgrade, I said, sweating profusely in swim trunks. He made a few calls, and soon, 3 resort staff showed up. One of them, the same gate guard who gave me the welcome packet, looked horrified. I got pulled aside, and we had the most awkward 3-way phone call with both reservation departments where they realized I had a room. A much smaller, perfectly average room in the main hotel. Room 309. No ocean view, no grill, no hot tub. I was moved immediately. No refund. No apology whine. Just a firm please don't use any charges under the Warren family anymore, sir. The real Lucas showed up that night. We made eye contact once in the hallway. He looked confused. I looked like I wanted to burrow into the drywall. I spent my last night eating dry chicken fingers from the hotel bar, sitting on the edge of the twin bed in room 309, staring at my own reflection in the black TV screen, wondering how I'd managed to live out a reverse home invasion. But hey, those 3 days. They were incredible. So this happened about a year ago, but it's been marinating in my head until now, and I think I finally have enough distance to share it without cringing myself into a black hole. I was going through a rough time. Long-term relationship ended, job was getting more stressful, and I'd started having what my therapist called early-stage burnout symptoms, which basically meant I was Googling how to disappear and live in a forest more than was healthy. So I decided to do what any emotionally exhausted millennial might do, book a quiet weekend retreat in the woods. I found this retreat online through what looked like a boutique wellness site. The ad used words like mindfulness, digital detox, serenity immersion, and, of course, deep introspection in nature. They had decent photos, a forested property, and claimed you'd reconnect with your truest self. It was also cheap. Like, suspiciously cheap. But I figured maybe it was one of those undiscovered gems. I booked it. Friday to Sunday. No phones, no internet. Just trees, journaling prompts, and other Zen-seeking strangers. Sounded dreamy. Friday afternoon, I drove up to the place. It was farther than I expected, up a winding road deep into the mountains. I lost cell service about 30 minutes before I even got to the gate, which was a thick wooden arch with the words Lumen Path Retreat Center carved into it. A woman in beige linen appeared like she'd materialized from the trees. She smiled warmly and handed me a small satchel for my phone, watch, and keys. "We'll keep these safe for you until Sunday," she said, like I was dropping off a toddler at daycare. I hesitated, then handed them over. No backing out now. The building was a sprawling wood and stone lodge, beautiful in a rustic, HGTV kind of way. Inside, everyone was barefoot. Like, aggressively barefoot. Shoes weren't just discouraged, they were forbidden. I was handed a pair of thin cloth slippers and shown to a minimalist room with a bed, a meditation mat, and a journal. No clock, no mirror, not even a plug socket. Then came the first surprise. A man in all-white robes came to my door and announced that the retreat was conducted in intentional silence. No talking. For the whole weekend. That wasn't mentioned in the ad. Okay, fine, I thought. That's probably good for me. I'm here to unplug, right? Maybe this is just part of the detox. Friday evening, we gathered in a candlelit room and sat in a circle. A tall woman with dreadlocks and a silver staff, yes, a literal staff, did a kind of humming chant while walking the circle. Then she handed us each a folded paper with a quote. Mine said, "The flame within must consume the ego before the ash can be born anew." Right. So Friday night passed with mostly silent meals, awkward nods at strangers, and staring at trees. Odd, but not terrible. Saturday is where things got strange. We were woken by the sound of a gong. At 4:30 a.m. We were guided silently in the dark, barefoot, of course, to an outdoor platform where we did sun salutations while someone played a didgeridoo. Afterward, a man with a long beard and zero concept of personal space wordlessly handed me a cup of green sludge and stared at me until I drank it. It tasted like blended moss and regret. Then came the fire ceremony. Still no talking. Still barefoot. We sat in another circle, this time around a bonfire, while a woman walked around with what looked like a hawk feather and waved smoke over our heads. She stopped in front of me, locked eyes, and whispered, "Yes," broke the silence to whisper, "You have not yet released your shadow self." Then she dropped a small stone into my lap and walked away. Excuse me? At lunch, they served something called conscious stew, which I swear was just boiled root vegetables with a single lentil for flavor. 1. Lentil. By this point, I was starving, confused, mildly hallucinating from sleep deprivation, and beginning to suspect I might be in a cult. That suspicion was confirmed Saturday evening during the path ritual. We were led, still barefoot, obviously, to a wooded trail lit with torches. Every few feet, there was someone standing silently in a robe, staring at us as we walked by. At the end of the trail was a clearing with a stone altar and a large carving of an eye surrounded by flames. We were instructed, via gesture and mime, to place our journal pages into the fire and offer our old selves. I wrote, "This is so weird and I want nachos on mine" before tossing it in. Then came what I now refer to as the final straw of madness. We were told, again, via silent hand signals, to lie on our backs in the clearing and close our eyes. Chanting began. Low, rhythmic, like monks on a synth loop. I peeked. A guy with face paint and antlers was walking among us, tapping people on the forehead with a staff. I sat up. Nope. I'd hit my limit. I broke the silence. Excuse me. I think I'm done. About a dozen heads whipped toward me in synchronized horror. The chanting stopped. The antler guy froze. The woman with the staff lady, approached me and said in the calmest, creepiest voice imaginable, "You are resisting the transformation." "I just want my phone and shoes back," I said. She sighed. The ego often resists its own evolution. No. I mean, I'm literally leaving. I had to argue, out loud, for 15 minutes before someone reluctantly agreed to let me exit the experience. They made me wait another hour while they prepared the departure space, which turned out to be a tiny shed with my stuff in it and a handwritten note that said, "May you find clarity on a lesser path." I drove back barefoot, hungry, and slightly traumatized. When I finally got back to civilization and Googled Lumen Path Retreat Center, I found out it was affiliated with an intentional living community that had been investigated, but not charged, for coercive practices. The founder claimed to channel the inner flame of truth and was apparently banned from hosting retreats in 3 states. So yeah. TIFU by going to what I thought was a peaceful retreat and accidentally joining a silent cult for 36 hours. At least I got a good story. And a rock. TIFU by trying to impress my girlfriend's dad with a harmless prank. I, 29M, have been dating my girlfriend, Jess, 27F, for about 11 months. We met through mutual friends and hit it off immediately. She's smart, beautiful, funny, and has a tolerance for my relentless dad jokes, which makes her basically a unicorn in my book. So when she invited me to meet her family during their annual 4th of July lake weekend, I was nervous but excited. I wanted to make a good impression. I grew up camping and fishing, and I figured I could hold my own. Plus, I had this idea of pulling a harmless prank on her dad, Dave, to break the ice. You know, establish rapport, make him laugh, maybe even earn a little respect for creativity. I know how that sounds. I do. But in my defense, it didn't start out as catastrophic as it became. The setup, Jess had told me that Dave is a prankster himself, classic dad energy, always ready with a rubber snake or an air horn. I figured he'd appreciate the effort. So I went to a novelty store and bought one of those hyper-realistic fake turds. I had this whole plan to sneak it into the cooler of beers he kept on the pontoon boat and act like I didn't notice it until someone reached for a drink. Fast forward to the weekend. Her family is great. Her mom made a ridiculous spread of food, her siblings welcomed me with minimal hazing, and Dave? He was everything Jess said, loud, gregarious, and already throwing beer-fueled jabs at me within 30 minutes. I thought, perfect. He can take it. That evening, we all go out on the lake. Sun's going down, tunes are playing, the drinks are flowing. I discreetly drop the fake turd into the Yeti cooler while Jess distracts him. She was reluctantly in on it. The cooler is packed, so it takes a minute for the turd to really surface, but then, there it is. Sitting right on top of the ice like it owns the place. Her dad opens the cooler, pauses, and just stares. And I mean stares. Now here's where it all started to spiral. He picks it up. Examines it. Doesn't say a word. Then he goes dead serious and says, "This isn't funny." I chuckle awkwardly, thinking he's playing along. He's not. Jess gives me this side-eye that's half abort mission and half you absolute moron. I'm still smiling like a dumbass when Dave suddenly launches the turd into the lake and mutters, "Not again. Not again." Everyone goes silent. Jess grabs my arm and whispers, "Oh my God, I forgot to tell you about Uncle Ray." So here's the thing, apparently, a few years ago, Jess's estranged Uncle Ray, who no one really talks to anymore, got very drunk on that same pontoon boat and had a, let's say, gastrointestinal emergency. He didn't want to pollute the family vessel, so he defecated into the beer cooler. And then insisted it wasn't him. It was a whole scandal. Cooler was tossed overboard. A new one was bought. People didn't speak to each other for weeks. A family legend was born. And here I come, bright-eyed and dumb, unknowingly resurrecting the specter of Uncle Ray's floating shame. Dave thinks someone is mocking him. Hard. He stands up, knocks over a drink, and starts accusing Jess's brother, who has a history of pushing things too far. The brother denies it, swearing on everything. Voices are rising. Her mom is now involved, yelling that this is exactly how it started last time and telling Dave to sit down before he throws someone overboard again. I decide this is my moment to fix everything. I raise my hand and say, "It was me. It's fake. I bought it as a joke." Dave turns slowly, like a horror movie dad. "You did what?" I explain the whole thing, even show him the novelty packaging from my backpack. Jess confirms it. I'm thinking, okay, it's bad, but at least now they know the truth. Wrong. Turns out Dave is not as chill about pranks as Jess made him sound. Or maybe I just misread the timing. He stares me down and says, "You brought fake S***T into my beer cooler." I say, "Yes, but fake is the keyword here." He says, "That's the part that bothers me least." We ride back to shore in complete silence. Her younger sister offers me a pity beer, which I accept, because I've clearly earned it. Back at the lake house, Dave pulls me aside. I brace myself. But instead of chewing me out, he hands me a towel and says, "You're gonna want to clean that cooler real good. Just in case." I spend the next hour scrubbing the inside of a Yeti cooler with dish soap and vinegar while Jess stands nearby, trying not to laugh. Later that night, Dave brings out a box labeled Ray's Relics and pulls out what I can only describe as an artistic rendering of the original cooler incident. Someone in the family apparently turned it into a wood-burned plaque, complete with a cartoon turd wearing sunglasses. And that's how I became part of the family lore. Every time I saw someone that weekend, I got a nod and a "Hey, sh*** cooler," or "Here comes Turd Ferguson." Even Grandma got in on it. At one point, she fake gagged when I passed her a hot dog. The cherry on top? Jess told me on the drive back that she's never seen her dad warm up to someone so fast. Apparently enduring humiliation with some grace is a family value. So yeah. I thought I was being clever. Instead, I reignited a multi-year family trauma, started a screaming match, and earned a nickname that will follow me to my grave. But hey, I got invited to Thanksgiving. TIFU by accidentally faking my own death and ruining my cousin's wedding. So this happened a few months ago, but the fallout is still echoing through my family. For context, I, 29M, have a bit of a history of being the disaster cousin. Not in a criminal or sketchy way, but more like, if something weird or chaotic is happening in the family, I'm probably either in the middle of it or somewhere on the edge with a confused look on my face. I don't try to cause drama, I swear, it just finds me like I have some kind of chaos magnet embedded in my skull. Anyway, my cousin Julia, 26F, was getting married in late November. Big church wedding, tons of extended family flying in, the whole 9 yards. I was invited, of course, and I RSVP'd yes. Thing is, around the same time, I was deep in a burnout spiral at work and decided I needed a break from everything. So I impulsively booked a solo backpacking trip across South America. My logic? I'd still be back in time for the wedding, no big deal. I did tell Julia about the trip in a very casual way, like, hey, I'm taking a little break to decompress but I'll be back for your big day. She seemed cool with it. But because I am me, things started to unravel immediately. 1 week into the trip, I lost my phone while hiking in Peru. Like, gone. I was staying in cheap hostels, off the grid, barely checking emails, thinking I'd just replace the phone once I got to Lima. That didn't happen. Instead, I got food poisoning so bad I thought I was going to actually die in a hostel in Arequipa. Delirious, dehydrated, I ended up being taken to a local clinic where I was kept for 2 nights. My wallet got stolen, still don't know if it was at the hostel or the clinic, and for a few days, I had no ID, no phone, and barely any way to contact anyone back home. Meanwhile, my cousin is trying to confirm final numbers for the wedding and starts reaching out. Obviously, she gets radio silence from me. She calls my parents. They haven't heard from me either. Now, my parents are extremely chill people, almost to a fault, but even they started getting worried when I hadn't called home for almost 2 weeks. Somehow, and this is the part one still don't fully understand, a friend of mine who had loosely known about my trip posted a vague tweet saying something like, "Can't believe what happened to Dan. Life is too short, man. Hug your friends." Total out of context, melodramatic tweet. He later admitted he was talking about me getting sick abroad and how it scared him, but to the internet, and especially to people who hadn't talked to me in weeks, it read like a eulogy. Enter Facebook. My great-aunt sees the tweet, misinterprets it, panics, and posts something like, "Rest in peace, Daniel. We loved you dearly. You left us too soon." Within hours, the post is spreading. My second cousin turns it into a whole tribute thread with baby photos. Someone digs up an old guitar recording of me from college and says, "Now we'll never hear another song." It becomes a full-blown digital memorial. I have not died. I am eating crackers and watching Peruvian cable in a hostel with a faint signal and no idea that I've been declared dead by my own family. The worst part? Julia sees all of this 3 days before her wedding. She's devastated. She calls my mom in hysterics. My mom, also panicked, starts calling the U.S. Embassy in Peru. I'm completely unreachable. It gets worse. Julia decides to include a moment of silence for me during the wedding ceremony. She changes the program to include a tribute. My name is printed, along with "In loving memory of Daniel M." Guests are crying. Someone plays "Tears in Heaven." My mom is sobbing into her corsage. My uncle gives a speech about how I always made people laugh. It's like my own funeral except I'm very much alive and obliviously hiking through the Andes eating street corn and wondering why the Wi-Fi sucks everywhere. I finally get back to Lima and borrow a phone from a guy in my hostel to check my email. I open it up and see dozens of messages. Some condolences. Some just, "Oh my God, please tell me you're alive." I think I actually said "what the F*** out loud at least 3 times. I call my mom. She picks up, and I swear, she screamed so loud she blew out the speaker. The fallout was nuclear. My mom cried again, this time from relief and also from the rage of having thought I died on some godforsaken mountain. My cousin Julia was less relieved. She'd already had her wedding, cried through her vows thinking I was dead, and had a full breakdown at the reception. Her honeymoon was apparently filled with "I can't believe this happened" conversations. She told me she's happy I'm alive, but also that she kind of wants to punch me in the face just a little. Now, here's the kicker, some people still think I'm dead. Because the wedding was the last time most extended family saw each other, they haven't all been clued in. A few didn't see the Facebook post correction later. So at Christmas, I walked into a family gathering and my great-uncle screamed. He thought I was a ghost. Someone dropped a plate. My aunt fainted. My cousin's husband literally ran out of the house. Also, the tribute video from the wedding is apparently still up on YouTube, unlisted but shared around enough that people occasionally send me messages like "So beautiful, I miss you, man." I don't know how to tell them I'm literally sitting on my couch eating goldfish crackers. So yeah. I accidentally faked my death, traumatized half my family, and ruined the emotional centerpiece of my cousin's wedding. Moral of the story, always back up your contacts, check in with your family when traveling, and maybe don't let your great-aunt post anything on Facebook without fact-checking it first. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. Let me just start by saying, I love old people. I respect old people. My grandma raised me. I help my elderly neighbor carry groceries. I mow lawns when I see them struggling, and up until this week, I had a 5-star Yelp rating, unofficially, among the over 70 crowd on my block. I say up until this week because now I'm basically Sauron to a legion of concerned grandmas. So here's the setup. I live in a duplex, and the other half is occupied by my neighbors Joe and Lydia, a super sweet couple in their 40s who often host Lydia's mother, a sharp and sassy 82-year-old named Betty. Betty is one of those ladies who survived 2 husbands, raised 5 kids, volunteers at the animal shelter, and could probably kill a man with just a look. I have a bit of a reputation for baking. It started as a pandemic thing, but now I stress bake constantly. Brownies, cookies, banana bread, you name it. And recently, I dipped my toe into slightly greener pastures. My friend gifted me some THC-infused gummies that didn't taste like bong water and hit with the grace of a feather and the strength of a freight train. Anyway, a few days ago I decided to return the favor and made some homemade weed gummies using a tincture. I put a lot of effort into making them look professional, cut into perfect squares, dusted with powdered sugar, sealed in a little Tupperware. I labeled them with a sticky note that said "Don't eat too many," smiley face, because I thought I was clever. Now here's where it all spiraled into hell. That same day, I also baked a batch of lemon bars for my coworkers. These were very much not infused with anything except excessive zest. I made 2 containers, one labeled for work and one unlabeled because I was planning to keep it at home. I think you see where this is going. At some point between cleaning the kitchen and re-watching The Office for the 37th time, I swapped the lids on the containers. The lemon bars went into the Tupperware labeled "Don't eat too many," smiley face, and the weed gummies went into the plain container that I had left on my counter. The next morning, I saw Lydia outside gardening and brought over the plain container to share with her and Joe, thinking I was offering them safe, citrusy sunshine. Lydia wasn't home, but Betty was sitting on the porch sipping tea like the empress she is. I explained I had made some lemon bars and wanted to share. She was thrilled. Told me they reminded her of the good old days and took the whole container inside before I could explain they were meant for everyone. At this point, I still didn't realize I'd made a mistake. I went to work, passed out the lemon bars to my coworkers, who all said they were a little bland, rude, and went about my day. At around 2 p.m., I got a call from Lydia. She sounded off. Hey, So, Betty isn't feeling too great. Do you know if there was anything weird in those lemon bars? My stomach did that cartoonish drop thing. No, I said, confused. They were just lemon bars. A pause. Because she's giggling in the bathtub right now wearing sunglasses and a tiara and keeps asking us if we believe in space. I went cold. I sprinted home like I was running a 5K, burst into my kitchen, and opened the container still sitting on the counter. Lemon bars. Labeled "Don't eat too many," smiley face. Oh my God. I had drugged a grandma. An elderly widow. A pillar of the bingo society. I immediately called Lydia back and confessed. I don't think I've ever apologized so fast in my life. She was surprisingly cool about it, once she stopped laughing. Apparently Betty had only eaten half a gummy, thankfully, but that was more than enough. She spent the afternoon serenading the neighborhood with improvised jazz songs about squirrels and tried to order 200 pounds of jelly beans off Amazon. Lydia assured me she was fine, more than fine. In fact, she said she felt light as a marshmallow and young again. But Joe was slightly less amused, especially when Betty tried to hotbox the bathroom with her magic vape stick, a lavender diffuser she mistook for a pen. That should have been the end of it. But this is TIFU, so obviously it wasn't. The next morning, I found a handwritten note slipped under my door. It read, "We need to talk about what you gave Betty. Margaret, 3B. Apparently, Betty had loved her experience so much that she went on a mini-campaign the next morning, telling all her friends in the building that I had some heavenly jelly candies that made her feel like she was floating through Woodstock. I'm not kidding, within 2 days, I had 4 grandmas and one very suspicious old man knock on my door asking if they could try one of those new vitamin chews. I panicked. I lied. I told them it was a one-time batch and I lost the recipe. Did they believe me? Absolutely not. By the end of the week, I was the target of a full-on gray-haired conspiracy. They started inviting me to dinner, showing up unannounced with casseroles, slipping notes into my mailbox with wink emojis asking if I had any more of the special snacks. One lady even offered to trade me a year's worth of her homemade apple butter for just 2 of the lemon candies. Meanwhile, Lydia and Joe are torn between laughter and mortification. Betty now refers to me as the Candyman and says I unlocked a part of her soul she thought had shriveled. I overheard her telling someone I was a shaman. And me? I haven't slept a full night since Tuesday because I keep imagining what happens if one of these ladies accidentally takes a whole gummy and astral projects into another dimension during knitting club. So yeah. That's how I went from friendly neighborhood baker to the accidental dealer of the geriatric underground. Pray for me. TIFU by accidentally setting my neighbor's house on fire because of a broken chair and a stray cat. It all started innocently enough, a regular Saturday morning. I was in the middle of a much-needed spring cleaning spree. The house was a mess, my laundry was piled up in every corner, and I had a long list of chores to get through. My wife was out of town for the weekend, visiting family, so I was home alone with nothing but the dog, a few random YouTube videos, and the overwhelming sense of dread that accompanies a to-do list you have zero desire to tackle. As I was sorting through the pile of clothes in the living room, I heard a faint meowing sound coming from the direction of the front door. I thought it was my dog barking at a squirrel or something, but when I opened the door, there was a small, scruffy-looking cat sitting right on the doorstep. Now, I'm not really a cat person. I've always preferred dogs, and the idea of taking care of a cat sounded like a lot of work. But this little guy looked so pathetic, sitting there shivering in the cold, that I couldn't just leave him out there. So, I did what any reasonable person would do, I invited him inside. The cat was skittish, but I managed to coax him into the house with some treats I had lying around. He immediately started exploring, weaving between my legs and darting from room to room. I figured I'd let him roam for a bit and then take him to the animal shelter later. But as it turned out, the cat had other plans. He made his way straight into the living room, where I had just finished cleaning up, and jumped onto the couch. Now, the couch wasn't in the best shape. It was old, lumpy, and one of the arms had been broken for months. I had meant to fix it but kept putting it off because, frankly, I didn't care that much. I had tied a few pieces of string around the broken arm to keep it together. It was stable enough for me to sit on, so I figured that was good enough. The cat, however, had different ideas. I don't know what possessed him, but he immediately started clawing at the broken arm. Maybe he thought it was a scratching post, maybe he was just trying to destroy my life, who knows. But what I do know is that the second he dug his claws into the string I'd tied around the broken part of the armrest, it came undone, and the arm of the couch collapsed. At this point, I was pretty frustrated. This couch was on its last legs, pun intended, and now it was completely ruined. But I had bigger problems to deal with. When the arm of the couch gave way, it knocked over a nearby candle that had been sitting on the coffee table. The candle had been burning for hours, something I hadn't even noticed in my cleaning frenzy, and now it was on the floor, tipped over, slowly dripping hot wax onto the rug. I panicked. I grabbed the candle and tried to put it back on the table, but my hands were shaking so badly that I knocked over a glass of water in the process. The water splashed onto the rug, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the situation had been contained. But then, to my horror, I realized that the water had just spread the hot wax all over the place, and the wax had somehow caught fire. The flames were small at first, barely noticeable, but they grew quickly. Before I knew it, the rug was on fire, and the living room was filling with smoke. I don't even remember how I got the fire extinguisher out of the kitchen, but somehow I managed to spray foam all over the place. The flames died down, but the room was now a disaster zone. The smell of burnt fabric and foam was overwhelming, and I could see smoke still curling up from the edges of the rug. That's when I heard a voice outside. My neighbor, who I'd only met a few times, was knocking at the door. I froze for a moment, then remembered that I had just set half of my living room on fire. I rushed to the door, opened it, and found my neighbor standing there, wide-eyed, staring at the smoke billowing from my house. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Not really," I said, trying to play it cool. I think I set my living room on fire." Her eyes widened even more. "What? How?" I stared back at her for a moment, trying to come up with an explanation that didn't involve the stupid cat. I knocked over a candle," I muttered, feeling incredibly embarrassed. "Well, it's a good thing I saw the smoke," she said, still looking at the smoke pouring out of my windows. "I'll call the fire department." No, I said quickly, holding up my hands. "It's not that bad. I already put it out." I stepped aside to let her see the damage. She gasped. The living room was a mess. There was foam everywhere, the rug was half charred, and the walls were covered in soot. It was pretty clear that this was not that bad. "I think we should still call the fire department," she said, already pulling out her phone. "You don't want to take any chances." I didn't argue. She called the fire department, and within minutes, a truck arrived. A group of firefighters came charging into my house, looking like they were ready for the worst. They quickly assessed the situation and confirmed that the fire had already been extinguished, but the damage was pretty significant. They also gave me a stern lecture about fire safety and how lucky I was that the situation hadn't gotten worse. As they left, one of the firefighters looked at me and said, "You're lucky you didn't burn down the whole block. Next time, don't let your house turn into a flaming cat jungle gym." I had no idea how to respond to that, so I just nodded. My neighbor, bless her, offered to help me clean up the mess. I could tell she was trying to suppress a laugh, but she was being nice about it. After a few hours of cleaning up the foam and scrubbing the soot off the walls, the house looked a little better, but it was still far from the cozy haven I'd hoped for. The cat, meanwhile, had disappeared during the chaos. I'm assuming he found a new hiding spot, probably somewhere safer than my living room. I never saw him again, but I wasn't too broken up about it. As for the fire, it ended up costing me a few $100 in repairs, a new rug, and a lot of embarrassment. And to this day, I don't know if I'll ever be able to live down the fact that I accidentally set my own house on fire because of a broken chair, a candle, and a very mischievous cat. But hey, at least I learned something about fire safety. And now, every time I look at the charred remains of my couch, I'm reminded of my catastrophic attempt at spring cleaning. Moral of the story: never trust a stray cat, never leave candles unattended, and never underestimate the power of a broken piece of furniture. And always, always check your fire extinguisher. It could save your life. Or at least your neighbor's sanity. TIFU by accidentally getting myself and my wife banned from the nicest restaurant in town. So, this happened a few weeks ago, and I've been sitting on it ever since, but I feel like now is the time to share. I've been wanting to tell the story of how I managed to completely wreck a nice night out, and in the process, somehow end up on the do not serve list of the fanciest restaurant in town. My wife and I had a pretty typical relationship, the kind that's built on shared hobbies, a sense of humor, and a deep love for food. And when I say love for food, I mean we would occasionally go to these fancy restaurants where the waitstaff practically bow as they serve you and the menu includes words you don't understand but eat because they make you feel sophisticated. It's a whole thing. For context, we live in a mid-sized city with a reputation for some really great dining spots. There's one restaurant in particular that's known for being ridiculously upscale. We'd been to this restaurant maybe twice before, and both times, we felt out of place. The staff is overly polite, the food is exorbitantly expensive, and I swear half the menu is in French. But it's a beautiful spot, so when my wife's birthday rolled around, I decided to be a big shot and book us a reservation there. Now, I'm not exactly a frequent diner at places that cost more than a mortgage payment. I'm more of a dollar menu with a side of who's got the best deal tonight kind of guy, but I wanted to make this special. I spent hours researching what to wear, how to behave, and even watched a few YouTube videos about proper table etiquette. I had it all planned out. Or so I thought. The evening arrived, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. I bought a nice suit, made sure I looked the part, and even read through some reviews online to make sure I didn't embarrass myself. I told my wife to wear something nice, and she, of course, looked stunning. We arrived at the restaurant about 15 minutes early, which I thought was perfect. We walked in, and as soon as we stepped inside, I could feel the stares. We were a bit underdressed for the crowd, think lots of black tie tuxedos and dresses that probably cost more than my car, but I brushed it off. It's her birthday. Let's just enjoy this, I thought. They took us to our table, which was near the back of the room, away from the main dining area. Fine, whatever. I wasn't picky. I sat down, adjusted my napkin in my lap like I had seen in the videos, and was ready to experience what all the fuss was about. The first few moments were fine, but then I realized I had no idea what the hell was going on. The menu was so fancy it made me feel like I was in an art gallery instead of a place where people actually ate food. There were dishes listed that had names like foie gras au meal and crème de truffe de boeuf. I stared at them for a solid 5 minutes, feeling increasingly panicked. I had no idea what I was reading. I mean, I knew foie gras was some kind of fancy duck liver thing, but I wasn't entirely sure what au meal meant. Honey? Butter? Was that normal? The waiter came over, all suave with his French accent and pristine uniform, and asked if we were ready to order. Of course, we weren't. We were lost. I stared at the menu like it was written in hieroglyphics. Do you have any recommendations? I asked, hoping he would lead me out of this maze. Well, sir, I would suggest the canard aux figs. It's our signature dish, he said, his eyes glimmering with confidence. Sounds good, I replied, trying to act like I understood what that was. I didn't. But the pressure was on. The moment had arrived to make an important decision, and I was going to do it like an adult. My wife, being the kind soul that she is, asked me if I wanted to try the tarte tatin for dessert, to which I nodded enthusiastically. Sure, let's get that. Why not? I said, acting like I knew what it was. The food came out, and that's when the nightmare really began. The duck was served in a delicate sauce with some kind of purple thing next to it, figs, I assumed. But there was something about it that didn't sit right with me. I couldn't even figure out how to eat it properly. It was like it was too fancy for me to consume without feeling like an imposter. I tried to cut it delicately, like I'd seen people do in fancy restaurants on TV, but then the knife slipped, and I accidentally flung a piece of duck into my lap. That's when I panicked. I looked up at my wife, who had a look of mild concern, but before I could say anything, I noticed that the waiter was staring at me with judgment in his eyes. I apologized profusely and tried to fix the situation, but somehow I made it worse. My fork slipped, my knife clattered onto the plate, and I swear I almost dropped a glass of wine onto the tablecloth. My wife tried to hide a smile, but I could see she was getting embarrassed. The worst part? The waiter decided to swoop in and assist. He came over, grabbed the knife from me, and began cutting the duck for me like I was a child. I was mortified. I couldn't even look my wife in the eye. The meal dragged on in this painful fashion, with me awkwardly fumbling through every bite, while my wife tried her best to hold in her laughter. I eventually finished my dish, and when the dessert came, things got even worse. I took a bite of the tart tatin, which I had assumed would be a simple fruit tart, but it was more like a caramelized apple concoction that made my mouth feel like it was on fire. I didn't know how to eat it delicately, so I just shoveled it into my mouth like it was a slice of pizza. At that moment, I saw the waiter hovering nearby, eyeing me suspiciously. I wanted to die. I kept trying to act like I was enjoying it, but I'm sure he saw through my facade. When the check came, I thought that was it, but no. The waiter leaned in and said in the quietest, most uncomfortable voice possible, "Sir, may I suggest you reconsider dining here in the future?" I was so confused, but he continued. "Your behavior tonight has been disruptive. Perhaps a more casual venue would be better suited for your style of dining." I was stunned. I didn't know how to respond, but my wife was mortified, pulling me by the arm as we quickly paid and left. The next morning, I got a call from the restaurant saying that we were now on their do not serve list due to my unacceptable behavior during the meal. Apparently, they had a strict policy about dining etiquette, and my lack of sophistication had been noted. I didn't even know restaurants had such a list, but there it was. So, yeah. Long story short, I accidentally got myself banned from the fanciest restaurant in town. My wife still makes fun of me for it, and I don't think I'll be going back anytime soon. But at least I learned something that night. When in doubt, just order a burger and fries. TIFU by accidentally sending a very embarrassing text to my boss, and it all started because of a simple typo. I never thought something as small as autocorrect could cause so much chaos, but here we are. It all began like any other Wednesday. I was at my desk, working away on a report I had been putting off for a while. The office was quiet and I was focused, at least, I thought I was. Around lunchtime, I decided to take a break and check my phone for any personal messages. I was single, and honestly, most of my texts were either from family or friends, nothing too exciting, but it was a nice distraction. As I was scrolling through my messages, I noticed a text from my friend Liz, who worked in a different department. Liz and I had been texting all morning about a new brunch place that had opened up in town, and we were planning to go together after work. The last text I had sent to her was about how excited I was to try the avocado toast, and she had replied with a laughing emoji, saying that I was too basic for liking it. Typical Liz. I decided to reply to her quickly before getting back to work. My fingers were flying across the keyboard, but in my haste, I misclicked and accidentally sent the text to the wrong person. Instead of sending it to Liz, I sent it to my boss, Greg. Now, let me explain something about Greg. He's in his late 40s, very professional, and he takes his role very seriously. He's the type of boss who dresses in suits every day, even on casual Fridays, and he expects the same level of professionalism from everyone else. He's a good guy, but I never, ever thought I'd be sending him a message that had absolutely no place in a professional relationship. The text I sent him read, "Can't wait to have that avocado toast later. I'm so ready to be basic and eat something everyone's obsessed with. LOL." As soon as I hit send, I froze. My stomach dropped, and a cold sweat formed on my forehead. My first thought was, maybe he won't even notice. But the reality quickly sank in. I had just sent a message meant for my friend about brunch, and now it was in the hands of my boss. The last thing I needed was for him to think I was unprofessional or, worse, that I was mocking the office culture. I immediately began to panic. My heart was racing as I debated whether or not to text him back and explain the mistake. But what could I even say? "Oops, sorry, that wasn't meant for you, but I'm totally obsessed with avocado toast now." It didn't exactly scream professional. I opted to wait and hope that maybe he wouldn't say anything at all. Maybe it would just slide under the radar. But then, my phone buzzed. Greg had replied. The message read, "I see you're getting into the avocado toast trend. Is this part of your new wellness routine?" I stared at the text for a full minute, my brain struggling to process what was happening. Did he really just acknowledge the avocado toast comment? Was he trying to make a joke? Or was this an elaborate test to see how I would handle the situation? I was absolutely mortified. In a panic, I started typing a response. I could apologize, but I didn't want to look unprofessional. Maybe I could make it seem like I had sent the message to a colleague about something work-related, something vague enough that it wouldn't seem like I was too casual with him. So, I typed, "Haha, yeah. Just trying to stay healthy and keep my energy up for the workday. I've heard a lot about the health benefits of avocado toast. Thanks for asking." I reread the text and thought it sounded somewhat acceptable, but I wasn't confident. Greg had always been very professional, and I had never once seen him crack a joke in the office. Now, he was talking about wellness routines and avocado toast like we were old friends. Before I could send my response, I received another text from him. "Great to hear. Just make sure you don't go too overboard with the trendy foods. You don't want to end up in the office with a new obsession every month." My face flushed. Greg was trying to have a conversation with me about food trends. This was not happening. I wasn't sure if he was genuinely trying to relate or if he was trying to figure out what kind of person I was. Either way, the awkwardness was palpable. At this point, I decided I needed to play it cool. So, I sent my message back, trying to sound casual but professional at the same time, "Definitely. I'm keeping it balanced, don't worry. Just trying to eat healthy." I hit send and stared at the screen, feeling like I had dug myself into an even deeper hole. I had tried to make a joke, but it just wasn't landing. I had no idea how to salvage the situation. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a notification from Liz, who was clearly unaware of the chaos I was causing. "Did you mean to send that to Greg?" she texted. I instantly thought, oh no. She knows. I felt like a child who had just been caught stealing cookies from the jar. I quickly typed back, "I'm freaking out. I sent the wrong text to Greg, and now he's talking about avocado toast like we're buddies. Help." Her response was quick, "LOL, oh my god, I knew something was off when I saw your reply. You're going to be fine. Just play it cool. He's probably not going to care that much. If he brings it up again, just roll with it." I wasn't convinced. But, like any good friend would, Liz tried to reassure me that I wasn't going to get fired over a text about brunch. "Besides," she said, "Greg might just be testing your sense of humor. Just go with the flow." The rest of the afternoon was a blur. I barely focused on the work in front of me. I kept checking my phone, anxiously waiting for the next text from Greg, fully expecting him to call me into his office for a serious discussion about professionalism. But it never came. Later that day, when I thought the worst had passed, I received an email from Greg. My heart skipped a beat. Here it is, I thought. This is the moment my career comes crashing down. I opened the email, and the subject line read, "Avocado toast, a metaphor for workplace trends?" I froze. I honestly didn't know what to expect at this point. I opened the email, and it simply read, "Hey, I did some thinking. If you're serious about staying healthy with your new avocado toast obsession, maybe you should take the lead on organizing the next office lunch. We could all use a little healthy food initiative around here. Let me know what you think." Greg, I nearly screamed. Greg wasn't mad. He wasn't upset. He actually wanted me to organize a healthy lunch for the office, and he was tying it back to my accidental obsession with avocado toast. I had managed to somehow turn a cringeworthy mistake into an opportunity. I took a deep breath and sent back a polite, enthusiastic response agreeing to organize the lunch. I had no idea how this had turned out so well, but I was grateful for the odd turn of events. Moral of the story: sometimes, the worst mistakes can lead to unexpected opportunities, and autocorrect can be both your best friend and your worst enemy. TLDR, sent an embarrassing text about avocado toast to my boss by accident, but he ended up offering me the chance to organize a healthy office lunch. TIFU by trying to impress my date with my cooking skills and accidentally starting a small fire in my kitchen. So, I, 26M, was excited about this date. It was my third date with Emily, 25F, and we had really hit it off so far. We had done the typical dinner and a movie thing twice, but this time, I wanted to step it up. I was going to cook dinner for her. I had this idea in my head that it would be a great way to show her that I'm a catch and can handle my kitchen. I'm not exactly a top chef, but I figured if I followed a recipe and put in the effort, I'd be able to impress her. The dish I picked? Beef Wellington. Yeah, I know, it's an ambitious choice for someone who's never cooked anything more complicated than scrambled eggs, but hey, how hard could it be, right? I spent the entire afternoon gathering ingredients, prepping, and watching YouTube videos to make sure I got it right. The recipe called for mushrooms, prosciutto, puff pastry, and, of course, a tender piece of beef. I even bought a fancy bottle of red wine to pair with it. In my mind, I was going to be the next Gordon Ramsay, minus the swearing. By the time Emily arrived, I was sweating in my kitchen, trying to finish putting everything together. I had the beef seared and wrapped in prosciutto, the mushrooms prepared, and the puff pastry all rolled out. I was feeling pretty good about myself. Sure, I was a little behind schedule, but I had the time to pull this off. Or so I thought. When Emily arrived, I greeted her at the door with a big smile and a glass of wine. She seemed impressed right off the bat. "Wow, smells amazing in here," she said, looking around at my neatly arranged kitchen. "I didn't know you could cook." I puffed out my chest a little, trying not to let my nerves show. "Oh yeah, I'm a bit of a wizard in the kitchen. Tonight, you get to enjoy my beef Wellington." I hoped she wouldn't notice my hands trembling as I gestured toward the oven. She smiled and sat at the counter while I finished up the last few steps. I carefully placed the wrapped beef into the puff pastry and started trying to seal the edges. At this point, I should have been more focused. But instead, I was distracted by her presence and the pressure to get everything perfect. I slid the whole thing into the oven, feeling like I was about to win a Michelin star. The recipe said it would take about 45 minutes, so I set the timer and turned to Emily. We chatted about our day, had some more wine, and it was honestly going pretty well. She was genuinely impressed with my attempt at making such a complex dish. I was riding high on confidence. But as the minutes ticked by, I started noticing a faint smell in the air. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just the mushrooms or something else in the oven. But then it got stronger. And it wasn't a pleasant smell at all. I opened the oven door to check on the Wellington, and that's when things started going downhill fast. I don't know how I didn't see it sooner, but the puff pastry was starting to brown way too quickly. I hadn't properly sealed the edges, and some of the butter from the pastry had leaked out and started dripping onto the oven's heating elements. And the worst part? There was a small flame licking at the edge of the pastry. Panic set in. I yelled at Emily to stay back as I frantically grabbed a kitchen towel, trying to put out the fire. I was flailing around like a lunatic, trying to put out a small flame, when I realized that wasn't going to work. In my panic, I grabbed the nearest thing, an oven mitt, and started batting at the fire like it was some sort of unruly dog. The flames flickered higher. I looked at Emily, who was now standing in the doorway of the kitchen, clearly unsure of how to react. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "Should I call the fire department?" she asked, her voice cracking. No, I've got this," I said, my pride completely overtaking my common sense. I'm just trying to save dinner. Everything's fine." That was a complete lie. I was about 2 seconds away from burning the whole damn house down. The fire was still growing, and my attempts to put it out were futile. In my panic, I had completely forgotten that I had a fire extinguisher in the utility closet. Instead of calmly stepping back and grabbing it, I continued to make the fire worse, somehow. At this point, Emily had her phone out, ready to call for help. And that's when I realized how bad the situation had gotten. In the end, I had to admit defeat and grab the fire extinguisher from the closet. I don't know if you've ever used one of those things before, but let me tell you, it's not like in the movies. The moment I pulled the pin, the thing shot foam all over the kitchen. The Wellington was ruined. My kitchen was covered in foam. And there was no way in hell I could salvage any part of the meal. I looked at Emily, who was standing there with a mix of confusion and concern. I wasn't sure what to say. "Well, this definitely wasn't how I imagined this evening going," I muttered, trying to salvage what little dignity I had left. To her credit, Emily didn't laugh. She didn't even seem mad. She just walked over, patted me on the back, and said, "You know, it's okay. At least we'll have a great story to tell." I forced a smile, still standing amidst the wreckage of my culinary disaster. We ended up ordering takeout pizza, of all things, and had a surprisingly good time despite everything. Later, I looked up how to make beef Wellington properly, again. I now know that there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and that it's best to start with something simpler, like pasta or, maybe frozen pizza. In the end, we had a fun time, and I think she appreciated the effort I put in, even though it ended in a fire extinguisher disaster. As for me? I've learned my lesson. Sometimes, it's best to stick to what you know. So, yeah, TIFU by trying to cook a fancy dinner to impress a date and accidentally setting my kitchen on fire. TIFU by inviting my boss to a casual dinner and accidentally making it the most awkward night of my life. So, this is one of those stories where I wish I could hit undo and just crawl into a hole to avoid all the social consequences. It's been a couple of weeks, and I'm still not sure how I managed to make this situation spiral out of control. Let me give you some background. I'm a 28-year-old marketing coordinator for a medium-sized company, and my boss, Dave, is a pretty chill guy in his mid-40s. He's easygoing and always seems approachable, which made me think it'd be nice to hang out with him outside of work. I'd heard some of the other coworkers mention that they'd done this before, and it sounded like a good idea, bonding with the boss, showing some initiative, making work feel more like a team environment. I thought it'd be a cool way to network, and maybe even a chance to discuss my recent performance and future opportunities. So, last Friday, I decided to invite Dave to dinner. Nothing formal, just a casual meal at a nice but not too fancy local restaurant. I sent him a quick message asking if he wanted to grab some dinner that evening. To my surprise, he immediately replied with a big sure. I figured it would be a low-key evening, just good food, some light conversation, and nothing more. Boy, was I wrong. We agreed to meet at 7 p.m., and I showed up early to grab a table. When Dave walked in, he looked different. For context, Dave is always in business casual, slacks, a polo shirt, and sensible shoes. But this night, he showed up in a full-on tuxedo. I'm talking a sharp black tux with the bow tie and everything. I nearly choked on my water when I saw him. "Hey, man. I thought this was going to be casual," I joked, trying to mask my surprise. He laughed it off. "Well, I had a meeting earlier with some clients and didn't have time to change. But no worries, this place looks nice. I'll blend right in." To be clear, this restaurant wasn't that nice. I was expecting something relaxed where people could wear jeans or a nice shirt, but definitely not tuxedo-level fancy. But alright, I thought, maybe he just wanted to feel classy. The waiter seated us, and we began the most awkward dinner I've ever had. Dave started by immediately diving into work topics, which I thought was a bit strange considering this was supposed to be a casual dinner. But hey, I didn't mind, as I had some work-related things on my mind too. We talked about some of the upcoming projects at the office and how I was handling the workload. It was fine at first, but then it started to feel like I was being evaluated. Now, the plot twist that I wasn't prepared for. Halfway through dinner, Dave starts to tell me about his personal life. Nothing alarming at first, just talking about his recent divorce and how difficult it had been for him. I felt bad for him, so I was sympathetic, nodding and offering a few words of encouragement. But then it got weird. He started going into very, very specific details about the relationship. I'm talking about their intimate life. I thought maybe he was just venting, but then it went from we didn't connect emotionally anymore to she wasn't into trying new things in the bedroom and then to I miss the days when we would. My eyes widened. I didn't know what to say. This was not the time or place. I tried to keep my focus on the food in front of me, taking quick bites of my pasta as if I could somehow escape this conversation by stuffing my face. Dave didn't seem to notice my discomfort, and just kept going. But the absolute worst part came when, out of nowhere, he pulled out his phone and started showing me pictures of him and his ex-wife, in some very intimate settings. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I didn't know if I should scream or just pretend this wasn't happening. The only thing I could do was stare in horror as he enthusiastically scrolled through these photos, explaining how comfortable they used to be with each other. I had to find a way out of this. So, I tried to pivot the conversation by bringing up a recent news story about a celebrity that we could both comment on. I thought this would redirect the flow of things and let me distance myself from these extremely inappropriate photos. And here's where it gets really uncomfortable. As soon as I mentioned the celebrity, Dave launched into a 20-minute tangent about how he actually met that celebrity at a charity event last year. It wasn't just a "yeah, I met them at a gala" kind of story, though. No, it was a "I'm friends with them and we've been texting ever since" saga. He pulled out his phone again, this time showing me a real text conversation with this celebrity. He even zoomed in on one of the messages where they joked about going on a ski trip together. At this point, I was nearly having a panic attack. My brain was in full-on survival mode, trying to process how I had gotten into this situation. Meanwhile, Dave was happily telling me about how he planned to get back out there in the dating scene, referencing his new dating strategy. He then started telling me how he was testing out dating apps and asked if I had any recommendations. I was frozen in fear. I didn't want to even be part of this conversation anymore, let alone offer dating advice to my boss. Somehow, the evening dragged on. The conversation kept cycling between work, his ex-wife, his celebrity friendships, and now, somehow, dating apps. I couldn't escape. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we both finished our food, and I made the move to end the night. Thanks for dinner, Dave. This was interesting. Let's do it again sometime. I'm not even sure if he heard me because as I said goodbye, he was already texting his celebrity friend about some future plans. I almost sprinted out of there to avoid any more awkwardness. Fast forward to Monday, and things at work have been strange. I didn't know if Dave was trying to act normal, or if he was just pretending like the entire dinner never happened. Every time I pass him in the office, I feel this tension. It's hard to look him in the eye without thinking about those photos and the deeply inappropriate conversations. Honestly, I'm mortified. And now I have no idea what to do next. I can't even look at him the same way anymore. I guess the lesson here is to never, ever mix personal life with work life, especially when your boss is involved. I'll be sticking to strictly professional relationships from now on. TLDR, invited my boss to a casual dinner to bond, but it turned into an awkward mess with him showing me personal photos of him and his ex-wife and texting celebrities, leaving me traumatized for life. TIFU by mistakenly sending my boss an email that I thought was to my friend about a very personal problem. So, here's the thing. I've been working at this marketing agency for about 2 years now. Things are going pretty well, all things considered, and I generally like my boss. He's a no-nonsense kind of guy, but he's also got a sense of humor and isn't a total tyrant, which makes my life a lot easier. That said, he's still my boss, and every now and then I get that tiny knot in my stomach whenever I have to report directly to him on a project. I imagine that's normal. Anyway, a few weeks ago I ran into a problem with a coworker. It's one of those annoying situations that you don't quite know how to deal with. I'll spare you the details of the drama because, trust me, it's just as petty as it sounds, but suffice to say that this coworker was making my life hell. I had been venting about it for a while to my close friend, who happens to work at another agency, just to get some perspective. She's one of those people who can listen for hours without judgment and always knows the right thing to say to make me feel better. Now, the important part here. I have a habit of emailing my friend for these long venting sessions. Sometimes they're just about work, sometimes they're about relationships, or whatever else is going on in my life. I can type out entire emotional monologues in one go. So naturally, when this coworker did something particularly aggravating, I was once again writing my friend a novel about how terrible they were, how they were taking credit for my ideas, and how I was just about to lose my cool. Now, here's where I messed up. I was having one of those days where everything felt a little off. I was tired, stressed, and just kind of mentally checked out. I went to my email inbox, clicked on compose, and began typing my usual rant. I even made a quick joke about how I was going to start a petition to get them fired. You know, classic over-the-top venting behavior. I was so wrapped up in what I was writing that I didn't realize I had opened the wrong contact. Instead of sending the email to my friend, I had accidentally opened a draft to my boss. And to make things even worse, the draft subject line was something completely random that made no sense at all. Let's say it was something like Sales Report Q2. Now, I didn't notice any of this when I hit send. I was so absorbed in my email that I didn't even glance at the recipient. I hit send, closed the app, and moved on to the next thing on my to-do list. I didn't realize the horrifying mistake until about 10 minutes later when I got a ping from my boss. It wasn't a response to the email, but a Slack message with just a single word. Panic immediately set in. I went back to my email app, opened my sent folder, and there it was. There it was, in all its cringe-inducing glory, the venting email about my coworker, with the subject line Sales Report Q2, sent directly to my boss. And the content, oh God, the content. Not only had I gone off about how this coworker was a useless, incompetent waste of space, but I also made a few jabs about my boss, who I didn't think would ever see the email. In my frustration, I had written, I swear, I could do this job better than them if they just left me alone for a day. But I guess they can't help it. It's not their fault, they're too busy pretending they know what they're doing. Sigh. At that point, I felt a deep, soul-crushing sense of dread. I thought I was going to pass out. There were no words. Just this overwhelming sense of horror that something I had written in the heat of the moment was now out in the world and directed straight at the one person who could fire me over it. I didn't even know how to respond. I sat there staring at the Slack message for a good 5 minutes, trying to come up with some kind of excuse. Should I just pretend like I'd sent it by mistake? Should I apologize profusely? Should I just act like it was some kind of joke, even though no one in their right mind would think that was funny? It didn't help that my boss's Slack messages were like a riddle. I couldn't tell if he was angry, confused, or just waiting for me to make the first move. In a panic, I did what any reasonable person would do in this situation. I picked up my phone and called my friend. I started rambling to her, explaining what had just happened and asking for advice. She was laughing, not in a mean way, but in a "I can't believe you did that" kind of way. She suggested that I immediately call my boss and explain myself before he had a chance to process everything. But here's the kicker: while I was talking to her on the phone, I got another message from my boss. This time, it was an actual reply to the email. I had no idea what it said, but I could already feel my heart plummeting into my stomach. I opened the email, and it was a single sentence: "Let's chat in my office in 10 minutes. Oh, God. The amount of anxiety I felt in that moment was unreal. My mind was racing, trying to come up with a way to salvage this situation. What could I possibly say to fix this? I knew I had to own up to my mistake, but I couldn't think of a good enough explanation. What was I supposed to say? "Sorry, I accidentally sent you a completely inappropriate email about my coworker and also made some not-so-friendly comments about you." In the end, I decided I had no choice but to just go in, apologize, and hope for the best. I took a few deep breaths, did my best to steady my hands, and walked to his office. When I got there, he was already sitting at his desk, waiting. The silence felt deafening. "Come in, take a seat," he said, without any hint of emotion in his voice. I sat down, fully expecting the worst. He looked at me for a moment before he said, "Look, I know you're frustrated. We all are. And I understand that things aren't always perfect around here, but I don't want to see stuff like that in the future. You're a talented employee, and I don't want to lose you over something like this." I'm still in disbelief that I managed to avoid being fired. Apparently, he didn't take it too seriously, though he did warn me that I need to keep my personal feelings in check when communicating with anyone in the office. He even mentioned that the email had made him chuckle a little, but that he was still going to expect a more professional tone going forward. I still have no idea how I managed to keep my job after that whole fiasco, but it's safe to say I've learned a valuable lesson: always double-check the recipient before sending anything. If it's even remotely personal, just don't hit send until you're absolutely sure. And maybe don't vent about your boss, even if they're really pissing you off, especially if you've had a glass of wine. I'm still cringing whenever I see him, but at least it's over. I'm not sure how long I'll be able to look him in the eye without wanting to crawl under a desk, but hey, I still have a job, and that's something, right? TLDR, sent an email to my boss by mistake venting about a coworker and making some unflattering comments about my boss. Panic ensued, but I somehow managed to keep my job after an awkward conversation. Learned to always double-check the recipient before hitting send. TIFU by accidentally turning my mom's birthday party into a disaster when I tried to be extra with the catering. So, last weekend was my mom's 50th birthday. I love my mom more than anything and wanted to make sure that this milestone birthday was extra special for her. She's always the one organizing family events, and I thought, this time, I'm going to step up and show her just how much she means to me. Big mistake. For context, I'm in my late 20s, not married, no kids, and still living at home because I've been saving up for my own place. I don't really host a lot of parties or get-togethers, and I'm not exactly known for my domestic skills. I can cook, but I wouldn't call myself a chef by any means. However, after browsing through Pinterest and Instagram, I figured I could create a beautiful and delicious spread of food for my mom's birthday. I was determined to prove I could pull this off. The plan was to host a small party at our house with close family and friends, something around 30 people. I knew that my mom had a few favorites when it came to food, so I figured I could do a combination of homemade stuff and some catered items. But then I got this idea: what if I took it one step further and made everything myself? I'd cook all the food from scratch. Pinterest was full of impressive recipes, and I felt confident. After all, How hard could it be to make some fancy appetizers and a few courses? I had a vision, and I was going to make it a reality. I went all out. I ordered fresh ingredients, bought expensive cuts of meat, and sourced all the vegetables and herbs I could find. I even splurged on some fancy wine and champagne to pair with the food. For the main course, I decided on a beautiful roast beef with all the sides, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, and a homemade gravy. Simple, but elegant. For appetizers, I wanted to do things like mini quiches, shrimp cocktails, bruschetta, and some gourmet cheeses. To top it off, I planned to bake a multi-layer cake with fondant, decorated with edible flowers. I started cooking the day before the party, thinking that I'd have plenty of time to get everything prepped and cooked. I worked from morning until night, following all the recipes to the letter. The kitchen was a war zone by the time I was done with the first batch of food. Flour everywhere, bowls stacked to the ceiling, and some dishes that didn't turn out exactly how I expected. Still, I pushed forward, determined to make it work. When the day of the party arrived, I was already feeling the pressure. I got up early, started making the cake, and had the roast beef marinating. Everything was going, sort of okay, until I realized that my oven was way too small to accommodate everything. I had to start cooking things in shifts, juggling between batches of appetizers and sides while trying to keep the roast beef at the perfect temperature. It quickly became clear that I had way overestimated the time and space I had available. Around noon, a close family friend arrived to help me set up. She took one look at the kitchen, the chaos, and the piles of unwashed dishes, and I could see the concern in her eyes. I was panicking at this point. I had about 4 hours before guests were supposed to arrive, and I still had a lot left to do. So, I asked my friend to go pick up the birthday cake from the bakery down the street. The original plan had been for me to bake it myself, but at this point, I realized I was in over my head. She agreed, but as she left, she gave me a worried glance. Time was slipping away, and guests began arriving. I tried to look calm and composed, but I was sweating bullets. My mom had no idea how much stress I was under. She walked in with a big smile on her face and instantly started complimenting me on the decorations I'd put up. I had done a little floral arrangement and some streamers, thinking it would give the space a nice touch. To be honest, it wasn't the most elaborate setup, but it was something. As the guests mingled and sipped on champagne, I was running around like a madwoman, constantly checking the oven and trying to plate everything. The roast beef came out slightly overcooked, the mashed potatoes were lumpy, I had forgotten to add enough butter, and the veggies were a bit charred from being in the oven too long. The appetizers? Let's just say they looked like something from a rejected Instagram post. The shrimp cocktail was way too salty, the quiches were undercooked in the middle, and the bruschetta was soggy from sitting out too long. The cake had arrived, but when I opened the box, I noticed it wasn't the multi-layer masterpiece I had envisioned. It was just a simple round cake with generic "Happy Birthday" written in frosting. I tried to salvage the situation, offering wine and food as if everything was going according to plan. But by the time we sat down for dinner, it became evident that things were unraveling. People were picking at their plates, pretending to enjoy the food, but I could see the awkward glances being exchanged. My mom, ever the trooper, smiled and said she loved everything, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. And I was too, my pride had taken a serious hit. After dinner, when it was time for cake, things got even worse. The fondant decoration I had so carefully planned for had melted in the heat, making it look like a soggy mess of floral colors. People still tried to cut into it, but it was dense and way too sweet. The whole table just sat there in an uncomfortable silence while I did my best to act like it was all okay. My mom, ever so gracious, thanked everyone for coming and made a point of telling everyone how wonderful everything was. But I could tell she knew I was disappointed. She came up to me afterward and gave me a hug, telling me it was one of the best birthdays she'd ever had. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. I knew I had failed, not just in my attempts at the food but in my failure to meet the expectations I had set for myself. The entire night felt like one big train wreck. To make matters worse, I spent the next week trying to clean up the mess, both the literal kitchen mess and the mess in my mind. I felt terrible. What I thought was going to be a fun, beautiful celebration turned out to be a disaster in the kitchen. I learned the hard way that sometimes, it's better to keep things simple and not try to be a hero when it comes to catering a big event. The next time I try to throw a party, I think I'll leave the cooking to the professionals. TLDR, tried to cook everything for my mom's 50th birthday party to make it special, but ended up ruining the food, overcooking the main dish, making soggy appetizers, and a melted cake. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.